Subscribe for all stories dangerous, weird, or altogether unexplainable. Have a weird or scary true story? Leave in the comments section for a chance to be in a video. I had a friend who was stranded in a rowboat for a couple of days. He got pretty dehydrated, and later told us of these wild hallucinations of beautiful female water spirits encouraging him to join them in the water. It was strange because he was one of those no-nonsense guys who didn't believe in the supernatural, but he said these things were so real to him. Not saying that I think sirens are real, but how did your friend know they were hallucinations? Very good question. Perhaps a shift in consciousness from dehydration doesn't make one hallucinate, it just opens you up to other levels of existence. My dad, who is as rational of a scientist as you can possibly be, has experienced very vivid hallucinations that he truly believed were real at the time. His friend's family had sold a sailboat to a buyer of the eastern seaboard, so my dad and his friend, young amateur sailors, decided to sail the boat up the coast and deliver it. This was in the late 70s or early 80s, so I guess they didn't have the 24/7 crack news team of the Weather Channel telling them what was coming. Apparently, a tropical storm was coming and they had no idea. It caught them when they were some ways from shore, with no exact idea where they were. They had to just try it out because going inshore in a storm like that was too risky when you didn't know the waters. They didn't sleep for several days while they had to fight tooth and nail to keep the boat above water. During that time, my dad says he saw all kinds of shit in the ocean. Mermaids, the souls of the damned, you name it. Really shows you where all those old sailors' tales come from. I doubt anyone will see this so late into the post, but here it is anyway. Back in 2006 I had an uncle living in Iceland who worked for CCP. He and his family lived there. Our family went down to visit them the summer of 2006, back when I was a young teenager. When I got there, my uncle mentioned he had a good friend of his with a boat. We set a date to go on the boat one late evening. When the time came, we got on the boat and started heading out away from the harbor, eventually settling about 2 miles off the shore. We had some brews, some sandwiches, and we were just talking and having a good time. As we're eating, I lean over the rail and look out. After about 15 minutes, I noticed what seemed to be the solid circular bioluminescent glow deep under the water. I pointed this out to everyone on the boat, and they observed it too. It was very strange. It moved swiftly under the water, slowly at first. Under closer observation it was a round circular disc with a glow emanating around it. After only a few seconds of observation it suddenly began picking up speed and zoomed away at a downward angle like 45 degrees from the surface, descending in depth. It must have been deeper under the water than I thought, as there was no wake or disturbance in the water. All three of us looked at one another then back to the water. We were all a little off-put by the thing's appearance and decided to head home. The next day my uncle's friend called my uncle. He had asked around from some of his fishermen friends about it. They said that observations like that were quite common and that no one blinked an eye anymore when it occurred. The older fisherman mentioned that the US military had sent ships and submarines out at some point to observe, sometime in the 90s, but left eventually after a few weeks. How big was it? How fast did it zoom away? I'm so intrigued. Was it man-made? What the hell was it? It was hard to tell the size because the water obscured it, but I think the diameter was 2 car lengths. It was pretty quick, like 45 miles per hour or 60 miles per hour. That was the off-putting thing, cause no fish can go that fast and neither can any submarine. No idea if it was man-made, some kind of new fish or what. Not that anyone thinks it's a fish. Military experimental submarine perhaps? But I don't get why they'd be so obvious, like half the fishermen my uncle's friend talked to had some kind of observation of it before. If you ever go to Iceland, ask the fishermen about it. It's strange how nonchalant they are about it. My grandfather was mossing on the east coast of Canada when he saw something with a horse-shaped head surface from the water. Look at him, only to disappear back to the depths. I was a kid when he told me the story and I sort of forgot about it until I came across some information about a cryptid called the Cadborosaurus. From there I discovered a news article covering the story of fishermen spotting a very similar thing half an hour from where my grandfather claims to have seen it. I guess the caddy has been spotted as far north as Alaska and as far south as California. Huge, about half the length of my ship, so approximately 100 to 140 meters squid, about 70 meters underwater. We were working on setting up buoys and clearing a few nets to relay a new batch. It was blood red in color, far from me but still close enough. About 300 meters away, the tentacles were thick as fuck. It kept floating nearby, eventually disappearing from our sight. The only time I've seen a creature like that. I am really thankful it didn't attack any of us. I sure as hell wouldn't have survived. This happened in late 90s in the Pacific Ocean. Not my story, but my grandfather who has passed away. He rarely ever told this story because of PTSD. My grandfather was stationed in Pearl Harbor during the attacks. His ship was sunk and him and his friends had to swim in shark-infested waters. This part is hazy in my memory. When swimming they finally find an abandoned life raft / piece of debris, no longer fuzzy. My grandfather got on it, turned around to grab his lifelong best friend's hand. And he has his arm, only his arm. He looks up to see his lifelong brother being slaughtered by sharks, gurgling blood, crying in pain, trying to yell for my grandpa's help. He also saw most of his crew and friends die scattering frantically in the water trying to save the others. They would either drown, get eaten, or both. He would never talk about World War II, who he killed, or who he saw get killed. The Pearl Harbor story was told very few times. Yeah, one I could answer. I was 3 or 4 days out from Antigua on a rowboat. 3 a.m. very little cloud cover and only a bit of moon. I'm in my own head thinking about food and on deck alone and rowing when I realize something is watching me off port side. So I turn my head to the right, rowing backwards remember, and whatever was watching me ducks its head underwater. Yes, underwater, and yes, a fucking head. Whatever it was had been watching for maybe a minute or so. I only caught a glimpse of what it was and to this day have no idea. It looked like a human-sized head, black pupilless eyes, no nose or ears, bleached white and wrinkly skin. Think albino seal. Scared the shit out of me so much so that I stopped rowing. I've looked everywhere to figure out what it was and the closest I got to was a goblin shark, but it had a fucking human-sized, shaped head. Most amazing was watching a meteor fall through a cloud and explode in green fireworks. One of my stories. In 2012 I was snorkeling in the Galapagos Islands. It was absolutely gorgeous there. I got close to a ridge that went above water, and I peered down. Below me were huge boulders that littered the seafloor on the ridge. For a moment I could have sworn that one of them was moving, just shimmering a little bit. I shrugged the thought off and continued exploring. All of a sudden a fish the size of my forearm went too close to the boulder. In an instant the boulder popped up and opened up its huge maw. In a split second it literally sucked the fish into its mouth. I swear this creature was 15 feet long, wide, and could have swallowed me whole. I stopped being curious and got the hell out of there. I told the people that I was with what I saw and they believed me, which was nice. But when I came back to the same spot 5 minutes later it was gone. I really don't know what I saw. My guess that it was a huge ray of some sort or some oversized bottom feeder freak of nature. The sea can be beautiful, calm, and peaceful, but it can also be terrifying at the same time. Some years ago my father-in-law and I sailed down Chesapeake Bay, up the coast past New Jersey and into Hudson Bay. During the trip he told me about something that had happened to him while he was sailing by himself in the Bahamas. After a day spent sailing he had found a quiet bay somewhere and dropped anchor. There was another boat at anchor already in the bay but he didn't think anything of it. He made himself some dinner and settled in. Shortly before sunset he saw a small boat being paddled towards him and he welcomed the oarsman, an elderly black man, aboard. They shared a couple of bottles of beer and after some small talk the man asked my father-in-law if he was planning to spend the night in the bay. My Phil said that he was, and they chatted a bit more. Then the man asked again, was he planning to spend the night at anchor in the bay? My Phil said that it was strange how the man kept asking about his plans, and when the man asked for a third time if he was staying he said that he was considering moving. They finished their beers and the old man paddled back to his boat. My Phil raised anchor, and found another bay with 3 or 4 boats already at anchor in which to pass the night. Was there a drug deal planned for that night? Who knows? But the old man had been trying to tell him to leave without actually saying it, and my Phil always said later that he felt as if he had dodged a bullet that night. So I'm not a diver, but my best friend from when we were kids ended up getting certified as an underwater welder and got a really solid gig on an oil platform. He said there was a problem on the main shaft they had to go down and work on, so him and his dive buddy suited up and dropped down to get to work. Now the way he tells it, they had a shared tether, and depending on the version of the story, a communication setup. Again, I'm not a diver, so I have no idea if that's a thing. So down they go at night, and it's the kind of dark that eats at that primal fear part of your brain. Visibility is roughly 15 feet, which was about the length of the tether. His buddy gets set up and locked into place, and suddenly my friend feels something move past him. He turns his head and looks out at nothing and feels a sharp tug and a loud pop. Turning around, he says right in front of his eyes and as far as he can see in any direction is a wall of silvery metallic reflective scales, and this wall moved past him for what must have been 100 feet. Eventually a tail goes whipping through the water, and he figures out that the tug and pop was his tether snapping because his buddy was gone. He says he dives and moves around the shaft, hopping whatever this was just separated him, but his dive buddy is gone. He surfaces freaking out and ends up quitting and flying home the next day. Now normally I'd call bullshit on almost every part of this story, but he ended up getting a continuing payment from the company for years. I saw the checks. He also became intensifying, unhealthily obsessed with sea monsters, doing research and spending all of his money, to the tune of not eating or paying rent. The last time I heard, he had decided it was some kind of giant driven fish. He stopped sleeping because he had nightmares, started doing meth to avoid sleep so he could stay up doing more research. I go with his mom to check on him, and they talk about the guy like he was still back working on the rig. He left for that job, a healthy, awesome 22-year-old, and what he saw completely broke him. His mom said he burned out, scared himself crazy. He committed suicide last year. I miss him. This is a throwaway account since I don't want to risk the off chance of people in real life finding out and thinking I'm crazy, even though I have never told anyone this story before. Me and two friends go down and rent a boat on Lake Okeechobee in Florida. We get a 30-foot pontoon boat that has a cover, although there's no cabin or anything under the main deck. It's winter in South Florida, so it's cool but not cold. Thus, we decide to just sleep on the boat instead of setting up a camp. We plan on spending 3 days and 2 nights on the lake. We spend our time drinking, fishing, and playing games. It's sometime on the second night when I just wake up. I'm still drunk from our previous activities, but my senses are on overdrive and I just feel aware of something. I was sleeping towards the back of the boat while my friends are at the front. It's eerily calm with no waves in the water. We were about 250 feet from shore with land on our port side. I started scanning the tree line looking for something. Nothing on land, so I scanned the water on the port side. Nothing. So I scanned the water after the boat. Nothing. I didn't want to disturb my friends up front, so I scanned the water on the starboard side. That's when I saw it. A skull floating in the water with just the eye sockets and part of the nasal cavity sitting there in the water looking right at me about 50 feet away. An immediate sense of dread took me. It was the most scared I'd ever been in my life. Then an even worse feeling took over, calmness and the sudden urge to jump in the water. I had the notion that I would be at home and at peace if I just jumped into the water, before I could act on it. I think one of my friends stirred in their sleep because I heard a beer bottle start rolling near the front of the boat. This snapped me out of it and the feeling of dread returned. I yelled at them to get up while I moved to start the engines. One doesn't respond at all while the other drunkenly tells me to fuck off. I yell again that I'm not fucking around and nothing. I'm about to pull the starter on the engine, yell again at my friends when I hear something. I freeze and listen closely, a very faint splashing sound that is slowly getting closer. I forget about yelling at my friends and focus on starting the engine. I pull and pull and pull on the starter and nothing. In between the pulls, I hear the splashing getting closer, but I don't dare look at the direction of the noise. Finally, the engine starts and I punch it out of there. I must have gone 30 miles before I came to a stop to conserve fuel. Until the sun rose and my friends woke up. I spent the rest of the night scanning the waters just in case. I had to make up a bullshit excuse to explain to my friends why we were so far away from our previous spot. I wanted to tell them, but I doubt they would believe me. When I got home I did some research, and apparently Native American tribes possibly used the lake as a burial ground, plus there are thought to be the bodies of many victims of hurricanes throughout the decades laying in the lake. Fishermen have found many human bones over the years. This was over 6 years ago, and I have yet to set foot near any body of water larger than my shower. No lakes, oceans, rivers, water parks, pools, hot tubs, nothing. I don't blame you if you don't believe some random guy on the internet. Many times I tried to write it off as my drunk self seeing things. However, I can't write off the feeling of wanting to jump into the water with something, real or not, that struck me with terror just a moment ago. Thinking about that feeling of wanting to go into the water with whatever was out there chills me to this day.